So before I begin, I want to say thank you to the whole McCurdy family, and in particular Dad, Brad McCurdy, who's basically at my side for probably 15 years out of 30 years of coaching. And he's doing right now what he did for those 15 years, holding a video camera in one hand and a lot of times talking to me on the phone if he was too far away from the actual event, in particular the state meet, which we'll talk about that in a little bit. So I talked to Taylor a while ago, and a lot of thoughts go through my mind. What will I say about Taylor? What types of things? And an incident occurred here tonight that kind of signifies exactly why Taylor is the special student athlete that she is in person. During the dinner, you may or may not have noticed that Mr. Greg Schwebston had some incident occur, and we had to call the ambulance. Well, Taylor, right on the scene, really, at that moment, and spent the whole time with him here in the corner of the room until the ambulance arrived, and went out with him to the ambulance, talked with the 911 operator, went through his vital statistics on the phone with 911. Those are things that made Taylor a very special person. She did the same, not in a medical sense, but as far as taking care of her teammates and her classmates, and they all speak very highly of her. There's a reason why Kenny Norris is choked up talking about it. She is that special of a student. There's no question about it. And so, I went through several of the things, and I had different types of stories, and some entertaining and so forth. But one of the things that she did during the 8 seasons that we spent together, she came to me with a riddle one time in practice, and she said, "Coach, this tree can fit through the green glass doors." The riddle was, what can fit through the green glass doors? I don't get it. It took a long time before I ever did get it. She says, this tree can fit through the green glass doors, but the branches can't. This grass can fit through the green glass doors, but the blades can't. And she says, your food can get through, but your meal can't. And finally, I would ask her, this wasn't like a one-day deal. This was a season of this riddle, the same riddle, on and on, week after week, and not telling me exactly what it was. She says, a runner can get through, but the team can't. So finally, after begging, it's not even that great of a riddle. It's simply that words with 2 identical letters side by side, like runner can get through, and the word team can't. Not an amazing joke, but to Taylor it was, because she dangled that out in front of me for at least a month before she revealed what it was. So I had lunch today with a couple of her classmates, and I just asked, what is it? Say something that you remember about Taylor. And it's overwhelming was her competitive attitude. Everything was a competition. This young man, who is here tonight, said, we used to go out and run, and we did some long runs. We would start at Grant Middle School, and we would run clear out to the prison, and then down to the airport, and back down in on Pole Lane Road. It was a 10 or 11 mile run. And the final mile or so would be from the library back to the middle school. And Taylor, it was a race. And this young man, according to him, would get sick, vomiting at the end of this race with Taylor to see who made it back to the track first. Very competitive young man, very competitive young woman. So when it was a race with Taylor, it was competitive. And when it was academics with Taylor, she had the same drive in her academics. That's why we call her doctor today. Here are a few highlights, and I'll keep them brief because they are also mentioned in your handout. She lettered in track 4 times. She lettered in cross country 4 times. She lettered in swimming 3 times. I went through the record database this afternoon, and I counted 10 indoor track records, 7 outdoor track records, and the all-time best cross country time for Harding High School. She was academic All-Ohio 2 times for track and 1 time for cross country. She was first team all-conference 3 times in track, 2 times in cross country, and I'm not sure about swimming. She was a Wendy's High School Heisman finalist. She earned the prestigious Claim Scholarship as a senior in high school. And I went back through some of the things that were memories. What track meet do I remember the most? And of course, we had a lot over those 8 seasons, or 4 seasons in track. So it was a Marion night relays that she was first place in the 4x8 in the school record in an absolutely amazing race that went right down to the finish. Taylor led off that race because shortly after that she had to run 1600 or the mile, which she won that also. And then toward the end of the meet, next to the last event, she was first place in the 3200 meter run. And then mad at me for not putting her in the 4x400, which is the next event. So wins the 2 mile, wants to be in the 4x4. But this was just short of the conference and districts and regionals and those meets. And I didn't want to do that to her, so she just had to stay mad at me for not letting her run in that. And then as far as cross country, of course, she had a lot of amazing races. But her junior season, state meet, to get to the state meet, she had to be in the top 8 in the districts. That wasn't very difficult for Taylor to get through, so we certainly trained through that meet. The regionals were held at Tiffin. Tiffin is a lot different type of cross-country course than it is here in Marion. It's very, very flat here, and it's very, very hilly on the Tiffin cross-country course. It's a tough course for our kids to get from our type of running back to the state meet. We had to make that transition at the Tiffin Invitational. You had to be in the top 15. And Taylor was 9th, and that's where she set the school record, was at that meet. At the state meet, which held at Scioto Downs back then, they started out in the middle of the field. You would think they run around the track, they really didn't. That she started on one end of the infield, and it's quite a lengthy infield. I think you've got a half a mile before you go from one side of the infield to the other, and then back halfway again. And if you're familiar with Scioto Downs, the big bleachers, but then there's a giant scoreboard for the horse racing out there, and the finish line is kind of right there. So they run the perimeter of that facility, and then they go out into some of the fields. You don't really see the runners during that stage. They come back into the stadium, and then go back out again on the south end. So there, you see them for the middle, the beginning, and the middle, and the very end, and there's a couple of points in there where they leave. To be All-Ohio, you need to be in the top 25. There's about 125, 130 runners in the state meet, and there are 2 positions that the coaches are yelling for. You're the overall winner, and that 25th position. Based on the statistics of her going to the state meet, we figured she's somewhere around the 35th to 40th fastest runner heading into state meet. She needed to move up 10 spots. At the state meet, she comes around the first half mile or so, and we're counting, and it's tough at the beginning. Looks like she's in there. She comes around the next time, she's back a couple of spots. She heads off into the back south end, comes back in. When she comes back in, she's got less than a half mile to the finish line. And if I remember right, I've got Brad McCurdy, Dad, on the phone, because I think he can see from where he's at. I'm down on the field. We're trying to figure out exactly where she is, so when she comes back in, I can tell her, you are at 25, or you're at 26, you need to move up 1. At one point then, she goes out of sight. For me, I can't see her going across the final stretch, and I don't know what happens in the final 100 meters, because she goes into that scoreboard area just one spot out or one spot ahead, but it's so crowded and it's so competitive. It's not sure what's going to happen. One girl falls down. It back and forth. I don't know for sure then at that point, because I wasn't allowed on that side of the course, exactly what happened. So I've got Dad on the phone, and we had just all had cell phones back then. Anyways, he thinks she's got it. She comes out of the finish line area with the All-Ohio plaque, or certificate at that stage. We knew she had made it. It was that time. I knew we would be here celebrating what we're celebrating tonight with her. She beat the odds at the state meet and earned All-Ohio. There was a couple other times when she beat the odds, or in some cases came out short on the odds. I bought one new car in my life. It was 2005 and had a keyless entry. Taylor sat at my door after practice for weeks pressing random buttons to get into my car. There's 151,000 combinations that could open my car, and she hit it one night. So I said, press the button, try it again. She didn't remember what number she had pressed. So while she beat the odds, she didn't remember what she had hit. To get to the state meet, you are in about the lowest 7%, the athletes that run cross country, the girls. To earn All Ohio, you're at about 1.5% to get that honor. In track, you have to be in less than 4% of the girls that make it to the state meet in track. She did that twice. Unfortunately for her, going into the senior year, with a lot of summer mileage, she was one of the 45 students out of 100, or not students in this case, 45 people out of 100,000 that developed mononucleosis at some point. It was devastating to me. It was one of the worst nights that I had gone through was the day we found out Taylor's senior season is probably not going to happen. And we had been training 50, 60, 70-mile weeks. We had really pushed it pretty good. She had done some missionary work earlier in the summer, and it's possible where that occurred. I'm not really sure. However, the doctor did release her 3 days before the district meet. Sure enough, she'll run. She's glad to run. And she makes to the regionals as just released, really, probably on Wednesday or so that week. She went on to run for Michigan State, and if you know Michigan State, they certainly have a good basketball team. That here, Michigan State has an outstanding cross-country team. Several Olympic trials runners were on that team, and Taylor was on that team too for 4 seasons of both track and cross-country, and earned a letter from Michigan State University. So while neither Taylor nor I can pass through the green glass doors, the Hall of Fame can. So I'd please welcome Dr. Taylor McCurdy White, Marion High School.